Welcome everyone to Biology 101. I am absolutely thrilled you're joining me for this explainer today. We're about to embark on a little masterclass, exploring what is, without a doubt, nature's absolute greatest engineering marvel, cellular tissues. We're going to uncover the hidden microscopic architecture that literally builds everything around us, from the tallest, oldest trees in the forest right down to the very body you're living in right this second.
Okay, I want you to do something for me right now. Just blink your eyes real quick. Now, take a deep breath. And finally, just reach over and touch your arm. So, what actually makes all of that possible? I mean, we rarely stop to think about it, right? But every single one of those actions is governed by a highly sophisticated, intricate piece of machinery operating inside you every single second of the day. You know, this isn't just abstract science we're talking about. This is the engineering of you.
So, here's our quick roadmap for today's masterclass. 1. Plants versus animals. 2. Plant growth and conduction. 3. Animal tissues in action. And 4. The musculoskeletal symphony. All right, moving right along to section 1, plants versus animals. Because to truly understand how we humans move, we first kind of need to look at organisms that don't.
Okay, let's just dive straight into this direct contrast. The most fundamental difference between plants and animals really just comes down to movement. Think about it. Most plants are totally fixed in one place, right? They aren't walking around, so they absolutely need structural support to stay firm and upright against gravity and wind and weather. Because of this, plant cells have a really rigid cell wall. Animals, on the other hand, were built for locomotion. And to achieve that, animal cells actually lack that rigid wall entirely. Actually, scratch that. It's not that they lack it. It's that by dropping that wall, animal cells can change shape easily. And that cellular flexibility is exactly what makes our bodies capable of movement.
Now, these structural differences aren't just random chance. They're entirely dictated by function. Mostly, it's about how these organisms get their food and how they grow. Animals have tissues that are specifically adapted to hunt, forage, and digest a huge variety of food sources. Plants, well, they have tissues meticulously designed to basically just sit in the sun and soak up solar energy for photosynthesis. And because their survival strategies are basically night and day, their growth patterns vary completely too. Animals grow dynamically all over their entire body until they reach maturity. But plants, they have continuous, localized growth in very specific targeted regions.
Which perfectly brings us to section 2, plant growth and conduction. Let's shift our focus here and ask a pretty basic question. How exactly does a tiny, fragile seedling become a massive, towering tree?
Well, if you take a standard onion bulb and just place it in a jar of water, you're going to see roots sprout and lengthen over a few days. It's a classic experiment. But here's the crazy part. If you snip the very tips of those roots off, they just completely stop growing, dead in their tracks. This perfectly demonstrates that roots really only grow from their extreme tips. These tips are packed with cells that just divide continuously, a highly specialized region we call the apical meristem.
So let's lay down a foundational definition here. Meristematic tissue is composed of actively dividing plant cells. They're the ones responsible for a plant increasing in length, getting thicker, in girth, and, this is super cool, even regenerating after a grazing animal takes a big bite out of them. The cells in these tissues are pretty small. They have thin walls and a really dense cytoplasm. But here's a quick question for the class. Why do you think these rapidly dividing cells usually don't have vacuoles? Well, vacuoles are basically a cell storage closet. A cell that's constantly, endlessly dividing simply doesn't have the time or space to store things. It needs to be sleek, light, and totally efficient to keep replicating.
Of course, eventually, those new cells do lose the ability to divide. They basically grow up and take on specific, permanent jobs through a process called differentiation. They transform into what we call simple permanent tissues. First up, we've got parenchyma. These are living, loosely packed cells mainly used for storing food and helping out with photosynthesis. Next is Collenchyma. These are living cells too, but they have these unevenly thickened corners because of a substance called pectin. Think of pectin kind of like rubber. It gives the plant essential flexibility so fresh twigs can bend in the wind without snapping. And finally, Sclerenchyma. Believe it or not, these are actually dead cells. They have incredibly thick walls cemented by lignin, creating this hard, strong, woody armor. Think of the tough, unbreakable husk of a coconut.
But beyond just having physical support, plants absolutely need a plumbing system. That's where complex permanent tissues come in. Xylem is the tissue that transports water and minerals from the roots all the way up to the rest of the plant. And what's just mind-blowing here is that the main conducting cells in xylem are literally dead and thick-walled, yet they somehow manage to pull water hundreds of feet up into the air, totally fighting gravity, through something called transpiration pole. Then, on the flip side, we have phloem, which transports the food prepared up in the leaves down to the other parts of the plant. And unlike xylem, phloem is mostly made up of living cells, like these specialized sieve tubes that are constantly monitored by companion cells.
Okay, so we've seen the brilliant but, very rigid engineering of the stationary plant. Let's move on to Section 3, Animal Tissues in Action, and see how this biological machinery actually powers your daily life.
I really want you to physically interact with this part of the explainer. Seriously, follow along with me here. First, just gently touch your elbow. You feel that hard, rigid structure giving you support? That's bone. Now gently fold the top of your ear over. Notice how it's soft, flexible, and springs right back into place? That's cartilage, providing crucial cushioning. Next, hold your hand out and wiggle your fingers, but stare at your forearm while you do it. See that movement way up in your arm? That's because tendons are connecting your forearm muscles all the way down to your finger bones like biological puppet strings. And finally, bend your knee. Notice how it only bends in one specific direction? That vital stability is provided by ligaments, which connect bone to bone and literally keep you from dislocating your joints every time you take a step. Now obviously, all of these moving parts need to be safely contained and protected, and that is the full-time job of epithelial tissue. It forms the entire outer covering of your body, your skin, and it delicately lines all your internal organs. Because its #1 priority is protecting you against mechanical injury, friction, and nasty microbe invasions, these cells are packed together incredibly tightly. There's almost zero space between them, forming a completely impenetrable, continuous barrier. It's basically your body's ultimate security system. So underneath that protective security layer are the literal engines of movement, our muscular tissues. First, we've got skeletal muscles. These are voluntary and striated, which just means you consciously control them when you decide to run, write a letter, or lift a heavy box. Then we have smooth muscles, which are involuntary and unstriated. These guys are behind the scenes handling the automatic, squeezing movements in your internal organs, like digestion. But the true, absolute marvel here is the cardiac muscle. Found only in the heart, these involuntary, highly branched cells work completely tirelessly. I mean, they never fatigue, beating rhythmically and continuously for your entire life. Just incredible. And that brings us right to our grand finale, Section 4, the musculoskeletal symphony. We've got the structural tissues, we've got the muscle engines, and now we just need to understand the ultimate control network that makes this whole complex machine work together in perfect harmony. This step-by-step really brilliantly illustrates the chain reaction of our nervous tissue. The specialized cells here are called neurons. Imagine you accidentally brush your hand against a hot stove. Boom. Step 1, the little branches of a neuron called dendrites instantly receive that heat signal. Step 2, the main cell body processes this incredibly urgent message. Step 3, this long fiber called the axon transmits the signal at literal lightning speed down its length to the axon terminals. And Step 4, those terminals deliver the emergency message to your muscle, causing it to instantly contract and yank your hand away in a fraction of a microsecond. Now, for all these rapid-fire signals, nutrients, and heavy structures to actually hold together, we heavily rely on connective tissue. And the absolute crucial concept to grasp here is something called the matrix. The matrix is essentially the background substance surrounding the cells, and it completely dictates how that specific tissue functions. For example, blood and bone. They are actually both connective tissues, but they couldn't be more different. Blood has this watery fluid matrix that allows it to flow easily and transport oxygen everywhere. But your bones, they have a super hard, rigid matrix packed tight with calcium and phosphorus, giving them the immense, unyielding strength needed to hold your body up against gravity. And hey, speaking of bones, I want to drop a pretty surprising fact on you. Have you ever wondered exactly how much of your total body weight is actually made up of the heavy skeletons supporting this entire biological symphony? Well, get this. On average, the adult human skeleton makes up just 12 to 15% of your body weight. That is it. That incredibly lightweight yet phenomenally strong biological scaffolding is what allows your muscles, tendons, and ligaments to pull, pivot, and effortlessly propel you through the world.
Well, we have covered a ton of ground today, right? From the totally rigid, armored walls of a towering tree to the absolutely tireless beating of your own heart. So I want to leave you with this lingering homework assignment for your mind. Later today, I want you to really think about the complex, perfectly timed biological engineering required just for you to stand up from your chair and walk away from this screen. Ligaments tightly holding joints in check, tendons pulling on bones, muscles contracting exactly on command, millions of neurons firing in microseconds, all of it safely protected by an unbroken cellular shield.
Honestly, how will you view your body's cellular machinery now? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep wondering, and I'll see you next time.